I'm delighted today to welcome Humaira Ikram to my episode of Aspects of Design. Humaira we're going to talk about gardens today because Humaira is a garden designer, but I do see, kind of in the interior design world, we sort of see gardens as outdoor rooms, another space. But Humaira is not only a garden designer, she's also a garden design tutor at KLC. She's been a guest judge on Netflix, no less, on the Big Flower Fight, which is the name of the show. She's also a contributor to the all hallowed and revered BBC Gardener's Question Time on Radio 4. And she also sits on various boards and panels for the Royal Horticultural Society. So Humaira, hello, lovely to see you and welcome. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
No problem. Can I just say, what an amazing intro. Thank you. You've made me feel really, really brilliant.
Well, we'll talk about it a bit later, but you've been very, very busy during lockdown and doing all of this stuff. So I was going to ask you about studying environmental science at King's, and, did you always want to be an interior designer or did you have other plans?
So you mean garden designer? But
yes, sorry. Did I say interior designer?
You did, but it's not what you do, so it's fine.
It's on my mind. Garden designer.
I had no idea I wanted to be a garden designer, and I did environmental science because it sounded interesting, and I was quite political when I was at school in the 90s, so we used to think about the environment and where not to buy, which banks not to bank with and whatever. There was lots of politics going on at that time, and I thought it would be a great course to do, which it was, but then I left there and I started working in the city because I got a job. And then we bought a house and I did the interiors, and they were like, it was interesting and I really enjoyed that. But then as soon as we stepped out the doors, it's like, wow, we've got this whole space. What do we do with it? And my parents had always liked their garden and had spent lots of time in it, mowing lawns and growing things. But I didn't have any interest whatsoever until I got my own house and my own garden and my own outside space. And I wanted to, make it really beautiful, but also make it really useful and an enjoyable space for people who could come to my house and have meals there and, entertain in that space. And it seemed like a logical step then to go into a course when I had the chance.
So do you think that your degree, in environmental science, did that influence how you did that first garden, but also how you design and create gardens now? Well,
definitely. There's two parts of that. So when I first learned when I went to college and I did garden design, I realized that it was all about aesthetics. There wasn't anything about sustainability at all. And I did my course 13 or 14 years ago. So I was slightly disappointed in that aspect of it because there were so many things that I thought we should have been doing. And so when I came out of my course, I was looking for, better materials. Like, how do I know what kind of planting should I go for? How do I learn all this information? And there weren't really any courses out there. And I tried a lot of places and different, societies and whatever. So when I took over the course at KLC, I really wanted to make sure that we had that inbuilt into our course. And the earlier you start with this, thinking in this way, the better it is, because then every single one of your projects, you actually have that in mind before you start designing, before you start planting, before you start doing anything. And the narrative is already there from the beginning.
Because you say, I was, looking at your company. Your company is called Redscape Design, and you talk about being, designing spaces that are human friendly, but that are, sort of pollinator friendly as well, and animal friendly and sustainable. So kind of talk to me about, how what you need to think about and how you can do that right from the start, so how you do it, but also, for somebody who's just got a very ordinary small garden, what can they do, as a really quick and easy thing?
So it's really about asking the right questions. So when you go to, get some materials, so wherever your wood is from, where is that wood from? Where does it come from? Does it come from a tropical hardwood forest? Or is it bound with all the same kind of what am I trying to say? The FSC rules that you have in Europe and the UK.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So you have to look at all the materials that you are using and ask the right questions about them. So what is the provenance? Where are they from? Who has cut them down? How far have they come to be here? And so all of those kinds of things. So even things like stone, in the past, people were looking for, maybe they were looking for reasonably priced things, which is, I understand that people have budgets. However, you can have something reasonably priced, but just go for a better material. And as a designer, we should be offering those choices to our clients. And sometimes the clients may not be interested, or they may not know that they're interested at the beginning. But once you offer them the choices and you explain the story behind it, then more often than not, they really get on board with the story, and they will tell their neighbors, and they'll say, we've got this deck, or we've got this stone, and it's, blah, blah, it's from here, and it's really sustainable. And it makes people feel better about themselves when they don't even know that there was a thing. Mm-hmm. But also, as a designer, I think it's your duty to show the best materials and the best garden design that you can. And for me, that also has to be sustainable, and you have to have the questions in your mind before you start.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what about sort of pollinator friendly, like bee friendly, insect friendly, even I don't know, I suppose hedgehog friendly? What are some of the kind of really simple things that we could do to sort of introduce those in our gardens?
So lots of plants are highly bred, and we have bred them over years because we really like the colour or something. And you may have noticed that roses nowadays, if you get sometimes they don't smell like roses, they just look really beautiful. And so what I always try to do is look to see if we can get a whole package. So if you can get a beautiful flower, which is also still really useful for pollinators, because sometimes they breed all those things out, because they make a double flower that a bee can't get into. So that's just to look nice, it's just for the aesthetics. So that's why you have to ask the right questions. Is this good for pollinators? Because if it is, it's a win-win situation. It looks great in your garden, hopefully it'll have some kind of scent to it, hopefully it'll be really good for pollinators, so you're getting more for your money and you don't even notice it. And because of that, you'll have wildlife in your garden, and it'll be buzzing and feel alive as it should do. Otherwise you're living in a sterile place, which could just be indoors. And we're not living in the outdoors, in a garden. You have to think about everything else that's around you. So for me, it's just finding the plants that would really benefit everything. And it's actually not that hard once you start looking. And because we've only just started to, over the last 100 years or so, have these really highly bred, species of varieties. Yeah. So, if you just look if you ask the right questions, it's really easy to find the ones that you can use in those kind of schemes.
So where do you, I think in terms of asking those questions, who do you ask? So I guess, where do you recommend people go? Like, do you recommend them going to a nursery? How do you find a good nursery that's got good plants, decent plants that will survive, when you get them home and plant them?
So the most important thing about picking a combination of plants is that it will work in the situation that you're going to put them in. Mm-hmm. So, if you buy lavender and you've got cold clay soil, when you think about lavender, where does it come from? It comes from hotter places. They have well-drained soil. It's usually not clay. And what happens to lavender in the winter is it does not like having wet feet. It doesn't like having the water surrounding it. So if you've got clay, don't go for lavender. So, because you're always going to be fighting it. Or if you do want to go for lavender, then you'll have to put in more grit or, loosen up your soil. So you always have to think about the actual position and the garden. The environment, exactly. So the thing you have to do is pick the right plant for the right place. So if you're looking for your own garden, do a little bit of research, find out which way your garden faces, test the soil, see if it's neutral or acid or alkaline.
And isn't there something that you used? I think you told me about this before. You used
a pH test. Yeah, it's just a pH. You can get it online. You can just get it delivered to your house. Nowadays, everything gets delivered. Yeah. So you just go online, look for a pH test. It comes in a little vial. You just mix it up, and it's got colours on the side, and you can work it out. It takes minutes. Mm-hmm. And so once you know all this information, and if you've got a tree, if it's quite shady, if it's sunny, once you've got all those things, you can actually go onto somewhere like the RHS, put all those parameters in, and it comes up with lists of plants that would work. It's that easy.
So it's that easy.
It's that easy.
Brilliant.
Takes a little bit more finessing to get exactly what you want, but you'll have a good place to start. You can you can have a look at that list.
Yeah. I think lots of us just have no idea, and we want to plant stuff because we like it or we think it's nice.
Yeah.
And then we're really disappointed when it just doesn't take or dies, or, you know, and then I guess it's that sort of finding, you know, those basics first, the kind of what.
Absolutely.
Like.
So once you've got your list, then you can go to your local nursery and say, this is my soil, this is the kind of thing, I've got this list, I'm looking at these kinds, and they will come up with other, you know, varieties, or, you know, they'll come up with other substitutions or whatever, other choices that you can use, and they can probably help you put something together, or you employ a garden designer and we do all of that for you.
Yeah.
You know, and, I mean, that's the thing.
There's a real merit in that. It's a little bit like an interior designer, but there's a real merit in employing a garden designer, because you know, you'll get it right first time, and then you kind of know where you're going, you can kind of add stuff, but then you've got sort of the template there of what you know is going to work. And you know, and as you say, a garden designer is going to know all the different sort of varieties and come up with plants that you may not have considered. And will be able to, because it's about, you know, you want sort of, you know, kind of fullness, you want color, and you want drape, and you want height, I guess. That's what I always look for. And
seasonal interest. So that might work for 1 month of the year, but then what happens in January and what happens in the autumn, say, you know, because that's the other thing with garden design. There's this whole other thing about time. So you have to think about time, and that 12 months of the year, what's going to be happening in your garden. So when you first start looking at plants, it is quite, you know, it's
totally overwhelming.
Because there's so much to think about. There's so much.
I'm a bit like, you know, I know what I'm doing with interior design, but with gardening, I'm a bit like, oh, I like it all those colors, and then I don't like those colors, and it's about the aesthetics without thinking actually how's it all going to look together, how's it all going to grow, how's it going to look over time, how's it going to develop. So
all of those things. And it actually, you know, well, we do a course for a year in it, and once you finish that course, that's the beginning of your journey. You're always learning. I mean, this summer I've spent the whole summer going to independent nurseries and talking to nursery people and looking at new plants, because I had a little bit of time, because we don't often have this time in the middle of the year. Well, you know, for the last 6 months we haven't been able to go out, and this last couple of months I've thought, well, I'm going to actually spend some time driving around the UK looking at specialist planting and growers who have all this knowledge, lifetime worth of knowledge.
And there are so many kind of experts, and I've been watching a little bit of that on Instagram, and I've been seeing that. So we're going to put, like, you know, your Instagram handle at the bottom of this, so if people want to follow you and get all of that, you know, all your kind of advice and your expertise, they can do that. So listen, I just wanted to ask you now about your projects, you know. So, you know, at Redscape, what sort of projects do you work on? Can you tell me about, you know, some of the sort of current projects that you're working on right now?
So I like to do interesting projects. So they can be small or large, but it doesn't really matter as long as there's something about them that's interesting and different. And so recently I've just completed a garden, which is by Hampton Court Palace, and we put a swimming pool in. And, you know, the clients really wanted to have a swimming pool, and they wanted to swim every single day of the year. So I said to them, should we look at a natural swimming pond, or would you like an actual swimming pool? So we looked at the options, and, you know, we've come up with this really lovely solution where we've got low chlorine, you know, that basically the most sustainable kind of real swimming pool you can have. And we've managed to get really good pollinator friendly plants in there, and they've used it all summer, and they're going to use it, you know, throughout the whole of the year. And we're just working on their front garden as well, which, you know, so say a different project is a front garden where just around the corner from me, where they had been, they wanted to have parking in their front garden. It was just a regular front garden, and they couldn't get it. And they were saying, you know, we'd like you to redesign our garden. And I said, well, if you really want parking, let's try and get it. So even though they'd been denied 3 times, we managed to work out how to do that. And so we got them parking, but we also gave them storage, a beautiful, you know, display all year round. So they've got the best of both worlds. They've got a really lovely garden. There's water management in there. Nothing goes into the drains. It all goes into the beds. Exactly.
Oh, fantastic.
And as well as having, you know, everything else that they needed, they've also got a parking space, which is one of the things that you have to do.
You're parking permit genius as well. Yeah, because...
Well... those are the things that people want, though, because especially when you live, I mean, I'm based in London, well, kind of on the edge of London, so things like that are always issues. And even though some people might not like doing small front gardens, I quite like them because you have to work really hard to make everything work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's that challenge, you know, it's about the sort of creative solution. Absolutely. It's kind of maximizing that small space.
Exactly.
So, I wanted to ask you about the garden design diploma at KLC School of Design.
Yeah.
So, you know, you talked about teaching the students about sustainability, which is really important and fantastic. And then, you know, kind of alongside that, you know, there's shows like the Chelsea Flower Show, which is in Chelsea here every year, and it didn't happen the way it normally does this year. But you know, how important do you think are shows like that for students and for kind of members of the public? So do you take students to Chelsea Flower Show? Do you get involved at all? How does that kind of work?
So there's quite a few different parts to that question, I think. So there's
Sorry,
we'll come back. No.
Sorry.
So I'll talk about the teaching and sustainability in a minute, but I'll talk about Chelsea first, if that's all right.
Yeah.
The flower show, you know, it's like the World Cup of garden design. So, you know, if you go there, if you're part of that process, it does feel quite special. I mean, you know, recently I've been talking to the RHS and we've been talking about how sustainable it is, and they're trying really hard. They are, you know, they're doing all they're moving in the right direction, but obviously I think everything has started moving much faster than you know, associations like the RHS can move almost, you know, like everything is sped up a bit.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're trying to so all of the materials have to be from sustainable sources. They ask that, you know, that happens when in the process of designing, and they do ask that most of the stuff is recycled or rehoused. So, you know, they're trying their best. It's not probably the most sustainable way of showing gardens.
Because we're talking about
the way it is
now, aren't we? Because they're just so impermanent. They're beautiful. I mean, they're the creme de la creme of gardens and garden design, but they're only up there for such a short time.
Yeah, so we're talking about that. We're talking through to the RHS about how we can maybe maneuver that into a different, you know, to make it more sustainable. But in the format that it is, it's still a really special place to be able to go. And I take students there every year if we can, you know, and we have been able to for the last however many years I've been there at KLC. And it's great because the students get to walk around the show, the ground, before the show opens. They get the opportunity to work there and volunteer as well beforehand and during the show. But when we do our walk around, it's brilliant because you get to ask all the designers what their concepts are behind their garden and why they've built it and where the stone is from and what's the plant that's going to be talked about. And every single designer, I mean, at this point, they're usually quite tired and they probably want to cry, and they've been working on this thing for a year and they've got 2 days left before the Queen comes, but they're still really, really, you know, available and generous. And they always want to talk to students and tell us all those things because actually it's their baby. It's like showing somebody, you know, this thing that you've been working on. And what I love about that whole process is on the course we teach, you know, the students about the process of designing starts with a concept, and the concept has to be really strong. Doesn't matter if it's a front garden or whatever, and that is what you get from these designers. It's always about this concept, and as long as your concept is very strong, everything else follows through. And for them to be able to see these big designers doing the same kind of things that they'll be doing and just getting to speak to them, it's like talking to rock stars. So dirty rock stars usually, crying rock stars,
Grubby,
but, you know,
muddy rock stars.
They're, you know, they're really lucky to be able to do that.
Yeah,
you know,
it must be incredibly inspirational for them.
But I think that, yeah, and it really is. And, you know, one of the projects that we do during college the year is that you do a show garden, you design a show garden, and the RHS come in and they help us judge on, you know, on that, and they talk to the students about the criteria that they like them to fulfill, and, you know, we use the briefs from the RHS. So it's like as real life as you can get. And then going to a show is really useful because you get to see people doing that, and where do you get your electricity from, and how do you water things, and, you know, where do the plants come from, all those things, all those questions. How do you make it work? How do you make this thing that looks like it's been there forever in 3 weeks? So, you know, that's what you have. And so it's just great to be able to have all those different strands to, you know, bolster the education of the students. So they get to do all the work, but then they get to see how other people do it, and then how it all comes together as well.
Amazing. So are you going to talk to me about sustainability and the students on the course now?
Yeah, so for me, it was a really big, sorry, forgot that first part of the question.
That's
That was
all
a long
right.
time ago.
Okay. I know, I remembered.
So, I mean, as I was saying, when I first started working, I really was looking for sustainable alternatives. And especially things like, I don't know if you know, but tree stakes. So we have, you put a tree in the ground, you have to stake it for a certain, 2 or 3 years until it's, can stand up on its own and the roots have kind of got out as far as they need to. So to stabilize it. And so you can get underground tree stakes and they were all metal and plastic and whatever. And I just didn't understand it. Why are we doing
completely
this?
not biodegradable. They
No,
just
totally not. Yeah, exactly. So I was always looking for options and I found them. And I just thought, well, why don't, it was really hard for me to find all these other things I wanted because they were not available commercially, especially in this country, but I'd had to look to Europe and further afield. So, and if we ask for these things, people will make them. And so the designers need to go to whichever company and say, I really want this to be, tell me what the sustainability, why is this sustainable and why isn't it? And tell me why you wouldn't go for something more sustainable. And, actually, I want that product. Can you please make it? So that's what we're trying to build into the course now, right from the beginning, that students are asking these questions because, it's really important for us. We're kind of custodians of the land. Mm-hmm. So we can't just go willy-nilly and throw, and then expect it to be all right. And we know now that that's what's been happening for the last 100, 200 years. Mm-hmm. And it's not turning out that well, mm-hmm. as the world hots up. So, yeah. And because we are custodians and we are actually already thinking about the environment, it's our duty to find the best way to, what we're doing is not sustainable. We're creating gardens, but really we can create them in the best way possible. And we are quite a lot of the gardens are helping people, or, we all know how much during lockdown it was. Absolutely, yeah. We all appreciated our outside space. Mm-hmm. And that's what we want to do. We want people to appreciate those outside spaces and also, do something good for the planet at the same time.
Yeah, and I guess it's making your kind of footprint, your human sort of footprint on the land as small as possible. Yeah.
Yeah. Right, well, what we're doing is, sorry, can I just do a little bit? Yeah. Just talk about. Yeah.
Of course you can.
So
you have the
so in the second. I know, but I don't, because you were in mid-flow then. So sorry, right. But. So in the second term, we talk about sustainability and we teach them all these things. But then from that point on, all the projects they do have to justify all their choices with sustainability in mind for the materials, the design and the planting. And I think that starts it makes you think in a slightly different way once you have to justify your choices.
Absolutely. And then also right from the very beginning, you're incorporating it. So that's sort of the way you're thinking as a student and then a graduate and then a designer. Exactly. And it's just, and you must, the students must learn from each other. The students must come up with some amazing kind of finds and ideas. And because this is an area that's just progressing all the time.
Yeah. And at the beginning, some of the students were a bit skeptical. They were like, why do we need to know about this? Which I thought was quite an interesting question because I've never doubted that we needed to know about this.
Yeah.
And I said, well, because we need to do the best that we can. And actually now, as we're, and they were saying, well, some clients just won't care. And that's true. Some clients won't care. Mm-hmm. But as a designer, you should care. So that's the thing, we kind of have to try and explain why it is important to our clients. Yeah. And sometimes it doesn't make any difference to put price or whatever else. It's just a better, it's just more sustainable. So does it matter?
But I suppose it's that thing about, if some clients don't care or they're not interested or they think it's going to be like a lesser version of what they're going to get. If you can show them and prove to them that this is the equivalent of the non-sustainable thing, only better, and it's not like, massively more expensive. So I go for this option. And I think most people go, okay, if it's sort of, similar to what I wanted anyway, it's not like a lesser version. Well, why not?
It's win-win, and as soon as you understand that that's possible, then there's no downsides to it at all.
Absolutely. So in terms of, I suppose, I'm thinking of just, kind of us ordinary people in our little gardens. So is there like, somewhere that you'd recommend that you could look, or, is there like a website or something where you can kind of look up sustainable stuff for?
Not really. It's actually quite tricky because this is quite a new thing that we're doing. And there are websites that are coming, that are being built, that I know people who are doing them, but there's nothing really. I mean, you can look on places like the RHS and other places like that. There used to be a particular gallery in London which was about materials, and they used to have sustainable materials in there, but it is trickier. So really, I would say wherever you go for your materials or plants or whatever, you just have to ask them the question and see what they say.
Okay, good advice. Now I wanted to ask you, my next question was going to be BBC Radio 4 Gardener's Question Time. I mean, it is just it's been going since 1947. I found out the other day when
I didn't know that until you told me. So
I've listened to it as long as I've lived in the UK, and I think lots of people who aren't gardeners, who don't have will listen anyway, because it's on a Sunday afternoon, I think, Phil.
Yeah, Friday and Sunday.
It's like therapy, just listening to it, and I just love the format and the presenters. So just tell us a little bit about how did this happen, and and how are you finding it, and what are you doing?
Well, I still don't know. I'm in shock, to tell you the truth. So I did a TV program last year about plants and flowers, and I happened to be a judge on that, a guest judge for the first week, and then somebody saw me on that from the BBC and they called me.
Oh my gosh, it's like overnight fame, it's like
they called me up and said,
your dream. Are you pinching yourself to make sure that this isn't a dream? Because that's just amazing. So obviously,
and I did say Gardener's Question Time. Are you? I thought it was one of my friends, playing a joke on me, but it wasn't. It was somebody real. So, and they asked me to do, a segment, and I said, okay, brilliant, because I thought answering questions on the panel would be too scary, and they were like, no, we just want you to do a segment. So, and I talk about planting design a lot, so I said, well, I'd like to do planting design, and so it went down well. And then they said, oh, would you like to do another one? And then another one. And now I've done 5, I think, in total over this summer, which is, almost one a week, which is kind of amazing. So, and it's my new, I love it. It's really been interesting.
No, I mean, well done. It's amazing. But so you've been sort of doing it in lockdown, and when I listen to Gardener's Question Time, and obviously I'm completely wrong, but I imagine the gardeners are all in a studio on a panel, like a game show almost, and there's a studio audience, and there's whoever's presenting it, and they're asking questions and they're all answering. But it's radio, so I know it isn't like. So what's it actually like? And I've been doing it in lockdown, so.
I think it is like that. It actually is like that normally, but because I've only been doing it during lockdown, so I've had a very different experience, and that's what the production team has been telling me. So when I was doing my segments, it was really interesting because I know that when I start getting excited, I talk very fast, and it's just something that I do, and I know. And when I was doing the radio, my first segment, I was talking to myself on my phone in my shed and just, talking into my phone. And so I was getting excited about plants, and it was getting a bit too fast. And so it was really hard because there's no one to tell me anything. It was just me doing it on my own. I don't have a producer. And apparently that's what normally happens. You have a sound person and a producer, and, they turn up and they see you, or you go to a studio. So I think I've had a very different experience of it, but I quite enjoyed that because I was just talking to myself and it was fun.
Yeah, it's less daunting, isn't it? If you just,
exactly.
I'm talking to myself and sure nobody's listening, so I'll just away to myself.
Well, pretty much that's how it's been. But so recently they've asked me to be on a panel, which has been very different and quite scary.
With Flowerdew and
kind of exactly. Yeah,
obviously he's got like a planty name.
Exactly. So, but it was that's been interesting because it was all done on Zoom, and we all record ourselves, and so I think that's happening at the moment. But then maybe they're going to go back to having live audiences, or maybe get the panel together. I don't know, but it's been an exciting and crazy summer for my media career, which was zero before.
Sorry.
It's been an amazing summer for my radio career, which was zero before this summer, and now is kind of going.
BBC Radio 4, no less.
Yeah, exactly.
So just tell us very quickly. It's on BBC Radio 4. When's it on and what time?
So Friday afternoon, and then it gets repeated on Sunday afternoon.
Okay, what time?
And it's on iPlayer. It's on iPlayer. Yeah, it's 3 till 4 on a Friday and 2 till 3 on a Sunday, I think.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
But it's on iPlayer, so you can just listen to it whenever you're wandering around on your headphones. And I think a lot of people do listen to it kind of just like, I mean, I listen to Radio 4 and I listen to the Archers, and sometimes the shipping forecast, I don't even know what they're saying, but it's just that whole soothing kind of, it washes over you, and it's like of a different time.
Just a really, I think it's sort of so therapeutic, because it's calm, and the format is the same, and it's unchanged, and it's just that little bit of calm and, you know, regularity in this crazy, crazy world.
Yeah. And you learn quite a lot if you actually do listen to it. There's a lot to take on board. But yeah, it's been a brilliant experience, I must say.
And so listen, you mentioned that you got that gig on BBC Radio 4, Gardener's Question Time, because you were on like a TV show, and you're being a bit modest there, because it was actually Netflix, no less. So it was what's it called? The Great Flower, the big flower fight. Yeah.
Yes.
So this is on Netflix. So tell me about this, because is it people hitting each other with flowers, or what's going on?
I mean, it's just the most lovely and gentle show, but it's still a competition. And the premise of the show is you have, I think there were 10 couples at the beginning on the first show, and they have to design and build a sculpture made of plants and other materials. And they had 3 days to do it, or 15 hours. I think it was actually 15 hours. And so, you know, I do planting, and I run planting teams at places like Chelsea and Hampton Court. And we usually have a year, maybe minimum is 3 or 4 months, to come up with a planting scheme. I have my team together. Everything is mapped out to the second. These guys were doing it on a slightly smaller scale, but they were doing it in 3 days, and they had, you know, no time to prepare. And it was week after week after week, and I just didn't know how they were doing it. And some of them weren't even florists or horticulturalists, so they didn't really know anything about plants or how to put together these kind of big floral displays. So it was, what my favorite part of it was that it was very it was gentle, but it was a competition. And these guys produced the most amazing, I mean, the week that I was in, they were producing giant pollinators. Somebody did do a snail, which is not really.
So do they have, is there a theme every week or something? So they are given like a theme or a concept. So the first week was pollinators. What do they have to do for that?
So they had to create I think it was a 2 meter by 2 meter sculpture, which was made of live plants. So they had to somehow put together a frame and then make sure that the plants that they put in still survived for 3 or 4 days until it got judged. So it's a crazy, I mean, you know, it's an unbelievable task to ask somebody to do who's never done that before. But they all managed it, and they did themselves proud. And I still see quite a lot of them, which is quite sweet.
Listen, how did you get that gig? How did that come about?
Somebody called me. Somebody phoned me up and said,
"You're going to put all the agents out of business." You know, somebody called me.
Well, I mean, I did a screen test, and they called me and said, "Oh, you know, we're doing this show. Would you like to come along?" I was like, "Well, I mean, I don't. Yeah, it sounds very scary. I've never done any telly before." They said, "Oh no, don't worry." So I turned up, and they came to see me at Chelsea when I was working at Chelsea, and I went and did the screen test, and I was terrible. I was the worst.
Oh, I thought you were going to say I'm not nodding because you were terrible. I thought you were going to say you were terrified.
No, I was terrified, and I was terrible. And I didn't think I'd got the job, but apparently they saw something in me that they thought was interesting, and they asked me to come in, and it was a brilliant experience. It was very different from anything else I've ever done, though, because it's a 45-minute program, and I think I'm on it for, I don't know, 5 minutes, all of 5 minutes, but it took 4 full days, and I had to be there from 5:30 in the morning till 8 at night, pretty much every day. And there was a lot of filming that went into that 45 minutes, and I had no idea, because I've never done TV before. So I didn't realize the amount of film you have to have, and the amount of takes you have to do, you know, you just say the same line over and over again in a slightly different way, with your hand in a slightly different place, in a slightly, you know, maybe faster, maybe slower. So, you know, you just keep doing these things. And they did an amazing job of editing it, and, you know, they had amazing contestants. So it was really fun.
Were you pleased sort of with the end result, you know, with the program and yourself? When you saw it, were you like pleasantly surprised?
I mean, I had no idea what it was going to be like. So when I saw it, I was really, I mean, they did a brilliant job of putting it together. And I do think that, you know, it came out just in the middle of the whole lockdown, so of the whole world. So, you know,
the global pandemic.
The global pandemic. And I think people were looking for something that was gentle, something creative, something outdoors, looking at plants. And I think, you know, because of all of those things, you know, people really enjoyed it. And you know, I'm just really pleased that people enjoyed it. It was
I know. Fantastic.
To be a part of.
Brilliant. Well done. But listen, I'm going to get on to something probably not as exciting as the glamour. The glamour. The cut and thrust of, you know, international Netflix telly. But I did sort of canvass, you know, a few people and said I was doing this interview with you. And I said, look, have you got any questions? So, you know, bearing in mind that as we do this interview, it's September. So we're coming towards the end of the summer. We're coming into autumn and winter. So a couple of people I had. So if you don't mind, if you could just give your expert.
Go for it.
So somebody asked, what do you do with hydrangeas at this time of year?
Okay, well, I mean, what you have to know which kind of hydrangea you have. There are lots of different types. Some of them you cut back down to, you know, to buds off the ground. It's something like Annabelle. If you've got the other one, you know, lace caps, you could just leave them and just tidy them up. If you've got petiolaris, the one that's sort of shadier one, you could just shape that and you know, breed it after it's flowered. But really, for me, I always leave things as long as I can whilst they're still looking good, and then I'll cut them back at some point. So, you know, plants are pretty resilient. They kind of, you know, you can do whatever you think is right within reason and they'll be fine. But you do need to know which type of hydrangea you have, and if you know, you can go onto the RHS and have a look for that exact type, and it will tell you the pruning group that it's in and what to do.
Oh, okay. So again, you could go back to the RHS. So
all of this information is on there.
Leave it looking good for as long as it can, and then
I would
prune it like hard. Do you prune it right back?
Depends on which kind it is. Yeah, exactly. Which is why it's harder to tell you without knowing that.
Yeah.
So because there are 3 different types, and they have different types of pruning attached.
Okay. Yeah.
But also, you know, the point of leaving up flowers, and I think that what I have been doing recently as well with planting design, and it's a big movement that's been going on for the last sort of 10 years, is not just looking at not being very tidy. We're always very tidy in gardens, and you know, that's exactly, and that has actually caused, you know, biodiversity to go down, because, you know, there's nowhere for anything to go because it's so tidy. So, you know, if you can leave stuff to hang around and to just degrade or biodegrade or whatever, you know, there are other insects and other things that will be using those spaces. So always try and see the beauty in the way something dies.
The beauty in decay.
Exactly. The beauty in decay.
Which is kind of all sort of this time of year is about, which is kind of the
absolutely
spring, where it's just the buds and everything and you're getting really excited. So
absolutely.
So
but enjoy that. Yeah, enjoy that, because it's the cycle of life, and actually we've become so tidy that we've forgotten that is part, that the decay is part of the cycle.
Yeah,
and that's how everything else comes back up in the spring.
Maybe we've become so tidy we don't see it, so
yeah,
we don't understand.
Or we think it's a bad thing,
but we've forgotten that it's there, you know.
Yeah,
but I guess
so, you know, it's really, I mean, when you go and look at trees and you look at the autumn colours, you know, it's the same kind of thing. You just have to appreciate that it's not green.
And they're doing that because they're dying.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. But I suppose for us amateur gardeners, you know, in our sort of little gardens, we're terrified of the plants that we've sort of tended and watered and looked at. We're terrified that they're going to die. So we need to kind of know what to do with them. So,
yeah,
you know, I think
absolutely. And I understand that. But I think that we just need to almost, like, it's up to garden designers and other people like me to just say to people, it's all right. It doesn't have to be like that. We can just relax a bit. It's fine.
Yeah.
So,
okay, good.
You know, and just enjoy it.
Yeah. So another question that I was asked was, you know, which we touched upon earlier, and you said you had to have the right soil, but was lavender, you know, at this time of year as well, because it can get quite woody if you leave it. So, you know, do you prune that right back now, or what do you recommend that you do with lavender?
So I've just cut back my lavender, and I've taken off all the flower stalks, and I've given them to my friends to make pockets and
lavender
whatever they're going to do, lavender things, exactly. So that's what I do. And you can cut it back a little bit, sort of a couple of centimeters into the new growth. You don't want to go into the old growth, because
you don't cut it right back to the old growth.
No, you definitely not, because it's a woody, it's a shrubby thing. So you just take the top layer off almost and just keep it in a shape. And that's it. I mean, you don't even have to do that. I just literally take off the flower heads, and my lavender is the right size and shape, and as I like it. So I keep it into that size and shape. So there's not much else to do really. And then you can have these little lavender bags and stuff in your wardrobes.
Yeah. Well, they're really lovely, and you have them under your pillow, and they
absolutely.
And again, they're natural, and it's using and being sustainable and not wasting stuff. So
all of those things.
Love it.
Seeing that whole cycle from beginning to end.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, another question, which, we can't have a conversation about gardening, I think, and garden design without talking about roses.
Yeah.
So somebody had said pruning roses, what time of the year do you need to do it, and how do you do it? Because, I think, I don't know, I think there's a definite art and a skill and a knowledge that you need to have. So
roses, again, there's lots of different types. There's climbers, ramblers, there's so you have to know which type of rose you have. If you've just got a shrub rose, you can just cut out the dead and decaying, and what you want is a little goblet shape, really. So that's what you're looking for when you cut things back. And you cut it back over the winter into the spring. So whenever you think, I think on the RHS they say 2/3 in the autumn and then 1/3 in the spring, but at the Palace, where we have our other classes, our practical horticulture classes, they cut it back when they have time. And guess what, plants are resilient, so they're fine. And so if you know which type of rose it is, again, go onto the internet, find out which one, because some of them you could just leave, some of them you have to just cut back after flowering, some of them most of them you do in the winter though, to shape them. So it's another one of those you have to find
in the winter, like
exactly.
Right
yeah, so you can maintain a shape, really.
And then in the spring, all of those will sort of kind of bud out.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Is that a train going past?
Yeah, that was somebody in my house, sorry.
We couldn't hear it. I couldn't hear it this end.
Yeah.
So,
good.
Another question was, if you've got a lawn in a shady garden, not a completely shady garden, but I guess partly shady garden with trees, and it's looking a bit patchy. So is it better to completely returf it or just reseed the patchy areas? What do you think?
Or is it better to not have a lawn? This is the question that I say to people.
What do you do then?
You can have some other surface that is not a lawn, because if the lawn is not doing well, it's not doing well for a reason, because maybe the tree roots are underneath it, there's not enough moisture. So either you could plant it, actually have a bed there, which would be which could be populated with plants that do well in dry shade, which you can then again go onto the internet and find a list of those things. Or you could just make it into a hard standing, so you could have some kind of, stone terrace or something that you sit on and you enjoy that space. Because if you have to work that hard, maybe it's not the right thing.
Okay. Fair enough.
There are types of lawns that you can get for shadier areas, so you can look those up. But I would think that so you can, which have particular species of grasses which are better in shade. So if you really wanted a lawn, you could try that. But I think that it's always going back to the right plant in the right place. And if a lawn is not doing well for whatever reason, maybe think about, is that the right plant to have in that place?
Okay. Good advice. Thank you. Now, another question. So say if you don't have a garden, or say if you've just got a tiny indoor space, or, a shelf or a windowsill, bearing in mind, sort of during lockdown, we all became much more conscious of, I think there's been a huge kind of interest in biophilic design, we talked about it on IGTV, and bringing your plants indoors and having something natural and living in your environment, even if you don't have a garden.
Absolutely.
So say if you've got a little tiny space and you can't sort of really do anything, what sort of, and, you want something that's really easy and really manageable, what sort of 3 plants, or what would your top 3 be, plants or herbs that you'd recommend?
I would always go for herbs, because it's, a dual use. And I always like something which has got more than just the one thing. So, basil, we all get those from the supermarket, and then they, we constantly replenish them. But in those basil pots, they probably have about 50 different plants. So if you get one of those plants, the reason they die is because they just run out of space and there's too many of them in there. So you can take them apart and you can probably make 4 or 5 or 6 different pots of them with a bit more space to give them room, and then they'll last a bit longer.
Oh, that's
so something like that.
Because I have that problem. I buy those basil plants, and I think, and I look after it, and I think, why has it just sort of died off? But so what they're doing in the supermarket is they're putting them in there to sort of so they're putting a number of plants and packing them in to make it look fuller. And
exactly. And so when you at point of sale, it's like, yes, I'm definitely going to have that, but really there's too many in the same space, so you could just maneuver those around. Then I mean, things like rosemary, any kind of herb I would go for. Chilies I think are brilliant because you only ever use 1 or 2, and then they go off in your fridge, so why not have a plant that you can literally just pick them off of? I love that, so I have one of those in my house. And then do
you put the chilies on the windowsill, where they get the sun?
Yes, I do. But you have to be really careful with windowsills, because especially in the winter, or as we go into a colder part of the year, what happens on windowsills is you get a real difference in temperature. So it might be warm and then it'd be very cold at night, and quite a lot of these plants don't like that. They like a constant temperature. So especially when you think about where they're from, so chilies are from hotter tropical spaces, they don't like that sudden drop in the temperature, so they won't do as well there. So move them away from the windows maybe in the winter, put them somewhere sunny,
on a radiator.
Not on a radiator, because that'll be too dry. So that's the other thing. So this is the thing that you have to think about with houseplants.
But you've just pointed out why.
So most houseplants are tropical, and they usually come from rainforests. So what you have to think is, what would they have? What would the perfect conditions be? And it's usually humidity and constant temperature. So those are the things which we don't have in our houses because we've got central heating. So we have to mist things the whole time and try and keep them at a constant temperature, and don't overwater them, because that's I think that's number one way to kill your plants, overwatering something so it sits in water.
Yeah, and it's just, as you said about the lavender, they have wet feet and they don't like that.
Exactly. So, I mean, so with the herbs, that's great. And then, I mean, I don't know if you look on Instagram, but all of my Instagram is full of monsteras. So there's it's a house plant. Everybody loves it. It's very easy to grow. It's got big tropical leaves. They unfurl in like an amazing way. It make you feel like a really proud plant parent. So, I would go for something like that. Or a pilea. A pilea has little round leaves and is really lovely and very easy to propagate, because you could just pull it apart, put it into a glass of water, and you get roots on it, and then you could give it to somebody else.
So how do you actually, that was something that wasn't on my list of questions, but you've just made me think of it. We're going to be here all day, Humaira. When you kind of get a cutting of something and then you want the roots to grow. So, say, for example, you're walking down the street and you see this amazing climber that somebody has, and it's climbing out over onto the street, and there's loads of it, and nobody would miss a bit if you took a cutting. So how do you do that? How do you take it?
So firstly, you're not allowed to do that.
Are you not? Okay.
No,
I've never
secondly,
never done it.
Can I just say, my mum does it a lot, and she just puts it into a pot and it grows, and that goes against everything the RHS have ever said, or anybody else on the internet, and you have to do it in a certain way. So I think quite a lot of the time, just try it. Take a piece, put it in some soil, hopefully it will grow. Something like a pilea that I was talking about earlier, you don't even need the soil. All you need to do is put it in some water, and you will see the roots coming and growing.
And then you know it's
exactly.
ready.
Then you know it's put it in the ground. So, I mean, I say try it, because what's the worst that's going to happen? Just put it in some soil, see what happens in a small pot, water it, tend it, don't let it get too wet. And actually, sometimes it's really good to cut the leaves so you don't have too much leaf on top, as opposed to, the bit in the ground. And then maybe even sometimes put a little plastic bag over it, just so it gets humid. So it has a little bit of humidity
a bit sweaty
while it's going. And then once it's kind of growing, you can take all that off.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, well, I'm going to give that a try. I won't be stealing anybody's.
If you knock on their door, they'll let you. It'll be fine.
Yeah, true. And I can try that. So I'm trying to look at my questions now. So, so this really was a question from a friend of mine, genuinely, is perplexed about this and concerned, and really wants to know. She's got a dog, so for all those dog owners out there, and she just wants to know, how do you stop dogweed burning the grass on your lawn?
So either you put your dog in a certain area and they have a play area and they don't go on the lawn, or you follow your dog round and water down as soon as they've weed.
So
There's actually no,
so you have to water
yeah,
it as soon as.
you just have to dilute it. It's just, you know, it just has that chemical reaction on the grass, and it's just what it is. So either you just think, well, I have a dog and this is what's going to happen for the next few years, or, you know, you could have a dedicated space for your dog to play and be in. So, you know, you have to separate the two.
So
There probably is some kind, I don't know what it would be, but there probably is a particular variety of grass seed that would probably be better for, but I don't know what that is, and I haven't found it yet. So if anybody knows what that is, it'd be great to have it underneath wherever.
Yeah,
let us know.
Send us a message and let us know if you're selling that, or if you know. Absolutely. That,
exactly.
Yeah, so I will tell her. So really it's just follow your dog around with a watering can.
Yeah, I mean, yes, or put them in a special area.
I know, but if you can't, you know, you think of, like, you know, where we live, London Gardens, they're not that big. You can't really sort of.
I tell you what's really interesting though. I have lots of friends with dogs, and their dogs just do not wee in their garden. They have to go out, so they have to take their dogs out 2 or 3 times a day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay. Saves your garden.
and I know she's going to say to me, I do take my dog out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes it's unavoidable. What can we do?
A territorial thing where they're sort of marking their space. Maybe if there's foxes, it could be a territorial.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other cats in the, you know, the cats in the street won't come into your garden, because I don't have a dog, and I have many cats who come in and wee and
and maybe it's if you sort of do fox prevention measures or cat prevention, then the dog won't do that.
I don't know. Maybe let's go with that. But I think it's just one of those natural things that you kind of have to.
Yeah. And I think we've covered that one anyway. So that was sort of veering off slightly from, you know, the sort of gardening thing. Now we're coming to the end. So I'm going to ask you, I know, I'm going to ask you what I've asked everybody, because we're still, you know, in this sort of COVID. We're not out of the woods yet, out of this situation. And it's, you know, it's been, you know, awful for lots of people. You know, it's been challenging, and some people have, you know, kind of, you know, discovered new things like you have, you know, in terms of, you know, doing your radio stuff, your TV stuff, because you haven't been able to physically be, you know, on site teaching and doing the stuff that you would normally do. But I just wanted to know, so what did you miss most during lockdown, and what did you enjoy most?
I mean, it's nothing to do with gardening probably, but what I missed most at the beginning was just hanging out with my friends and, you know, giving my mum a hug and, you know, going to see art and, you know, just going out and experiencing things, because, you know, we weren't able to go anywhere. But what I was really grateful for was that I have a family that I actually quite like, so that was quite good. And
you discovered that you actually quite like them, and that you all got on okay.
Exactly, and we're really lucky. We do have enough space though, so I think that makes a big difference. And we have an outside space, which made a massive difference to me. And I didn't stop working at all, and I know you didn't either. But we had enough space and enough internet connection. I think that was really important to be able to do all the things that we had to do within our confines. But I just really began to appreciate things so much more, you know, birdsong, sitting outside, spending evenings just looking at plants, and just, you know, literally all those things that I've loved. And I was too busy because I was on a train or I was traveling for 2 hours, and I really don't miss any of that. I don't miss any of the traveling, and I don't know why we all used to do it if we don't have to. And I think that we have been really lucky because we can still do everything that we love. And I know that lots of people were in an unfortunate position where they couldn't do any of the, you know, they weren't working or whatever happened. And, you know, has been terrible for them. And I feel really grateful and really mindful of the fact that I've been able to do what I've, you know, loved over the last few months. But, you know, really, it's about having my little bubble, you know, and I actually really love everybody in it. So.
And appreciating, I mean, you know, just it's the kind of little things, you know, the things that we take for granted, as you said, family and, you know, friends and stuff. But have you found, you know, kind of during lockdown or since lockdown, because, you know, people were at home for such an extended period of time, you know, lots of people have a newfound appreciation of their outdoor space. So have you found that business is kind of got busier because of that? People are saying, I've spent so much time in my garden, I need to do it now. And in case you get locked down again, I really want that space to be, you know, as I want it. So
Yeah. I mean, to tell you the truth, we were in one of those industries where we were very lucky and we almost didn't shut down at all.
Yeah.
So I had projects that were running during lockdown, but because they were already moving and we had to get plants and things in, they were kind of almost one of those things that could keep going, and it was all outside. So and so I had 2 or 3 projects running the whole way through lockdown, as well as college and everything else, and I found that people are definitely getting in touch, but there's still a little bit of nervousness about where we're going and how, how much time this is going to be and what, what's going to happen. But I mean, I'm doing a kitchen garden at the moment, and possibly I'm going to see a new garden project next week. So, and I went to see 3 of them in one day a couple of weeks ago. So people are really interested because, we're going to be spending more time in our homes, whichever way, even if we went back to, even if we go back to going into work and stuff, I think a lot of people have found that they can do quite a lot of their work at home. So, people are looking at their spaces and seeing what they can, how they can make them better.
Yeah. Fantastic. And my final question now, just, with all of that in mind, what would be your dream project? I'm really fascinated to know what would be your absolute dream project.
Do you know what? It's really interesting because I just really love a project without parameters with clients that I really like. So that's what I like doing. I like sitting down with my clients, finding out what they like and hanging out with them, getting to know them really well, but then coming up with the best project possible. And budgets often get in the way of that. So if I could have an unlimited budget,
you always do.
With the nicest clients, but literally, just a really big space that we could play with, and actually the whole thing about garden design is you get a designer in because you want to get it right, but actually it's still an organic process. There are things that you have to look at, and one of my projects that I'm working on at the moment is one of my favorite projects because I've been doing it for 8 years and I really know the clients.
8 years?
Yeah, we've done 3 or 4 different.
Tell me about this project then.
It's just by Hampton Court Palace, and the garden's quite big, and it goes down to the river, and so we did a top terrace, and then we did a parterre, and then we did a marquee lawn. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, and now we're doing a kitchen garden, and we have a boat. So there's lots of spaces and big. It's like the best place.
And then that you're staying with this garden and you're seeing it grow, seeing it develop, adding things in, and
absolutely,
it's like raising a child.
It really is, but that's what gardens are. They are never finished. Gardens are never finished, and so what the best kind of project is one that you can go back to and make sure it becomes, as beautiful and as big and as useful and as sustainable as it can be, because you have that constant input into it.
That is lovely. That is so lovely. And Humaira, thank you so much. It's so lovely to see you.
You're so welcome. Thanks for asking me. Thanks for asking me. It's been great to talk to you. I haven't seen you for so long.
I know. And hopefully I'll see you soon.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Bye.